which of these facts are true and which ones are made up. Hey guys, we've got a special video prepared for you today. Here we found a bunch of interesting facts regarding one of the most intelligent point guards in NBA history, Rajon Rondo. However, there's a catch this time. There are some facts in this video that just aren't true. Let us know down below in the comments which facts you think are the correct ones and which ones you think are blatantly wrong. Be sure to stick around until the end of the video to make sure you don't miss any of them. We'll start with number 10. The Phoenix Suns had surprisingly traded his draft rights away to the Boston Celtics in exchange for a future first-round pick that was eventually Rudy Fernandez. Back in 2006, when Rondo was coming out of the NBA draft, the Celtics knew that he was going to be a special player. They were locked in serious trade talks with the Suns for quite a while, but finally struck a deal when they were offered Rondo and Brian Grant. Grant wasn't really useful in this trade. He didn't play a game and was released shortly afterwards. However, Rondo slowly became a star for Boston. As for Fernandez, well, he never played for the Phoenix Suns. As a matter of fact, the team traded his rights in the same class over to the Portland Trail Blazers in exchange for cash considerations. He bounced around a little bit in the NBA, but never really got a chance to settle down and make a mark in the league. I'm sure the Suns have looked back on this trade for quite a while and realized just how much of a mistake they made. Or did they? Now we're on to number 9. Rondo's career-high scoring average was 15.2 points per game. It came during the 2009-2010 NBA season when he was still with the Boston Celtics. His scoring took a huge leap compared to the 11.9 average he'd held the entire season before that. And that wasn't the only thing he had career-high numbers in either. He also averaged 11 assists and 3 steals per game. Side note, he was actually the first Celtics player in franchise history to ever lead the NBA in total steals in a single season. Now, sadly, that team didn't end up going all the way in the postseason, despite knocking off the Miami Heat in 5 games. They actually knocked off the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic in that same postseason run. However, they matched up against the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals and eventually lost in a heated 7-game series. Rondo unfortunately never reached those numbers again, but he did end up winning a championship, so he does have that going for him. Moving on now to number 8. Rondo never made it into the Final Four of the NCAA March Madness tournament. As shocking as that might be to believe, he really wasn't able to get over the hump and make it into the Final Four despite playing alongside All-American stars like Joe Crawford and Randolph Morris. The three of them put together multiple amazing performances, but they just couldn't get there. He played 2 years with Kentucky and actually ended a season with the most steals recorded in a single season in UK history. It just didn't matter how much he tried to carry that squad though, the team must have just been destined to lose in the tournament. At least his stats were absolutely phenomenal during those 2 years in college. That's gotta make him feel good, right? Coming in at number 7, Rajon Rondo finished in 8th place in voting for the MVP award back in the 2012 NBA season. Rondo was in the same conversation as other superstars who are hard to imagine considering the talent they had at the time. There was a serious debate regarding Chris Paul, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Rajon Rondo this particular season. Honestly, at the time, he would have been guaranteed an MVP award had he actually been able to shoot from behind the arc. Instead, there was a hefty argument, as I just mentioned, one of which that was formed off of the basis that Rondo's team relies on them too much. He was the primary ball handler that year, and even had Kevin Garnett admit that he turned their season around because of his leadership. That was also because he averaged in double-digit assist totals that year. Unfortunately for Rondo, though, he finished 8th place in the voting, and LeBron James walked away with the hardware. At least nowadays, he's got a somewhat consistent perimeter shot, although I might not use the word consistent, it's more like confident. Next up at number 6, Rajon Rondo has never been paid more than $14 million in a single NBA season. Rondo has been a wildly successful leader and point guard on every single team that he's played for throughout his career, yet somehow he's never made over $14 million in 1 year. Now, his career earnings put him over $110 million, but that's over his extended career. I could take a guess that one of the biggest reasons for this likely would be that he's never the best player at his position. It seemed like he was always being shown up by better and faster point guards, guys like Chauncey Billups, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, and now Steph Curry. This isn't to say Rondo has never been a good player, but every time he switched teams, there was always players at his position better than he was. Obviously, in the last few years, he couldn't surpass that mark now that he started to decline in his career, but hey, maybe he could accomplish that feat if he somehow had some ridiculous season. So, how many facts so far do you think are incorrect? Make sure you stick around until the end of the video to find out if there are even more. Moving on to number 5. Rondo attempted to make it onto Team USA back in 2010, but they didn't put him on the roster. Well, actually, he withdrew from consideration, which is a little bit different from being told no. Regardless, there were reports everywhere that the only reason Rajon backed out of consideration was because he thought he wasn't going to be named to the roster anyway. Only 13 players could be named to Team USA's roster, but with days remaining, he called and didn't want to be there anymore. It looked at first glance like he was a shoo-in to get named to the roster, but things got weird after the exhibition matches. He got hit with a DNP in one matchup, and suddenly he felt as if the coaching staff didn't want him on the team anymore, mostly because he had an inability to knock down perimeter jump shots consistently. It was really interesting because given his talent and resume at the time, he should have made it onto this roster, but instead he just left with literally zero reason. Some reports claim that Rondo just quit because, like I said earlier, he didn't want it to be announced that he was cut. Still, I don't think I would just leave like that, especially if I was starting in the majority of games up to that point. Coming in at number 4, Rondo believes that the Utah Jazz have the most obnoxious fans in the league. Even if players never show their true feelings, you gotta realize that everybody has their own fan base that they dislike the most, and for Rondo, that's the Utah Jazz. This actually isn't very surprising that he said this, considering the Jazz fan base gets ripped up pretty often nowadays for being racist and hurling terrible insults at players during games. Now, this quote came way back in the year 2011, so it's possible Rondo has changed his mind since then. Chances are that he probably hasn't, but hey, you never really know. Anyway, I think it's fun to hear players be open about these types of things because it kind of allows you to connect with them and understand them a little bit more. I mean, sometimes those answers aren't always great for fans out there, but it could still be a nice little insight into their playing days for or against certain teams. We'll move on now to number 3. Rajon is a Connect 4 prodigy. He takes the game Connect 4 incredibly seriously, and that's because he knows how good he is at it. He never has mercy for anybody he lines up against in this game, and he could genuinely be better at this than basketball. Rondo once destroyed a young Sacramento Kings kid reporter in the game. Later, a story came out from Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk said that he walked past Rondo playing against a teammate on the plane back from a game, and the two were being super serious about it. Rondo actually lost that game, and Dirk said that the second the final piece went down, they started arguing and yelling. Nowitzki said he couldn't believe what was happening. These two stories should be a lesson to anyone out there who could possibly get the chance to go up against Rajon Rondo in Connect 4. It's really not worth it. I guess that large brain of his helps him think 3 steps ahead and not just on the basketball court. Coming in at number 2, the Celtics were working diligently on a trade to send Rondo to the Thunder in exchange for Russell Westbrook. This may sound completely insane to a lot of people, but Rondo had some issues going on outside the basketball court that had people questioning if he was going to demand a trade. Reports kept popping up that the Celtics organization was heavily involved in talks with the Oklahoma City Thunder. This wasn't just a glossed over report either. People started to get interested and kind of wanted to see where these rumors would go in the future. However, the Thunder obviously didn't want to get rid of their superstar player, but they did still want to acquire Rondo from the Celtics, not in exchange for Russ, but so they could pair him with him. Could you imagine the impact this would have had on the league? But wait a minute, what if those trade rumors never really happened in the first place? Come to think about it, I actually can't remember if those were real or not. Anyways, on to the next fact, and it's number 1. Rajon Rondo felt like he wanted to get more out of his shoe deal with Nike, so he left the company. Most high-caliber superstars in the NBA love to sign onto a shoe deal with a big company, but rarely decide to go in a different direction. Rondo was originally a part of Nike, but chose to leave in 2013 after he received a far better offer in his opinion. That offer was sent over from Anta, the Chinese-branded shoe company. They signed him for 8 years at the time and even offered him an ownership stake in the company. Nowadays, other high-caliber players have worked with Anta at some point, including Klay Thompson and CJ McCollum. In my opinion, though, I don't think I would have made that leap from an established company like Nike, but it must be proving to be a valid investment on Rondo's end. I wish I'd gotten that offer years ago. If you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to click on the terrifying times Rajon Rondo actually fights players next.